Hey, welcome back. In this section, we're going to talk about learner-centered design. So, learner-centered design is about the learner, not about you, the instructor. So, when we're designing, we got to have this open mind that we got to think of a beginner mind. And what we were trying to do is we're trying to limit some of our bias. So, as an instructional designer, or an instructor, we need to park our own biases and design with the learner in mind. So the learner's got to be number one. So the idea that keeping an open mind, trying to control those biases we have, sometimes it's hard to even see a bias that we have, and it's even harder even to correct some of those biases. So when we're designing everything, we need to park our ego a little bit and design for the learner themselves. Because that is the relation we're having. That's the most important person. The learner is the one responsible to learn and understand the material. But as responsible educators and a responsible education, it's our responsible to provide them with all the material needed to be successful. So one way to do this, we're going to talk about decreasing cognitive load. When we look through at this, we got those two channels again, like our visual channel and an audible channel. What we want to do is we want to just decrease the stimulation that they're getting from both sides. So the less stimulus they have, and we to make it simpler, define the stuff, make it a little simpler to understand. With less stimulus, the easier it is for them to learn. So by the end of this section, what we're going to do is you're going to be able to identify how to decrease cognitive load to increase transfer learning and make it more centered around the learner versus the instructor or the designer. Again, cognitive load. What we're talking about cognitive load is why it's important because we're talking about working memory, right? The stimulus comes in, they pull information from their working memory, and we can only hold so much information in that working memory. So really, when we're presenting, we got to limit the number of topics, ideas, tasks when we're delivering. So if we think about this, these strategies are used to increase the transfer of information or learning, if you want to call it, and decrease the amount of cognitive overload because we don't want to paralyze them with too much information coming at them at once. So one way we can do this is sequencing. How we build our courses. Do they follow a logical step all the way across, right? So does it go from one, two, three? Are we building upon the last step, or are we coming in with one concept, another concept, a concept or an idea or task that should have been taught at the beginning? So we got to make sure we have really good orders. So basically, what it comes down to is how are we building the learner's journey, right? So this, I'm going to start referring to this more often. I think the idea that comes from the advertising industry, the business industry. How do you have a buyer's journey? We need to think about our learner's journey and how they are going to make it through there. That understands our sequencing. Is it in a logical form where it builds upon one another, each information you teach, and do you have the scaffolding coming with it? Next, we do not want to present more than three tasks, three ideas, three concepts or processes at one time. Even sometimes highly complicated processes and concepts or even tasks all have to be even broken down into smaller steps. So ideally we have 1 to 4 in the working memory. If we present with three, it allows other people that third space to bring in information from their working memory from past experiences to help make the material we're teaching sticky. But what's even better is one idea. If we can present always one idea, one task, one concept, and then break it down into smaller parts to teach the learner, we're going to find that they're going to actually grasp the information quicker and faster. Another thing we're going to do is, again, if you have a task or a concept that is very complex or very big, what we need to do is we need to break it down into smaller bite-sized tasks. So it might be, you might think you can teach this task up here in one go, but really what you might have to do is break the task into a bunch of smaller pieces, teach those as a foundation. This would be building the schema, or what you call it, chunking information or automaticity. And the more that they do it, all of a sudden they will get the big picture up here. So again, this is your kind of building your underpinning knowledge, your scaffolding, or sometimes, you might be calling it spoon feeding. Next, you want to break down multiple. This is my biggest pet peeve. People who put text on PowerPoint slides. Now, whether you're doing this online, whether you're doing this face to face, people can't read and listen at the same time. So, first of all, put the bullet points. If they're important enough to be bullet points, the content is that important to be on a screen, then you need to break them down again into multiple little sections. Again, break down the break down the slides of multiple bullet points into individual slides. This is not having more slides is not going to make your course run longer. It's just you got to be better as an instructor that's presenting it face to face. Or also when I'm teaching, like say online here, building these, you still just are going to be able to get through and the timing will be the same. Next, we're going to talk about color. Big one here is color. So use color when you put it on your screen to match objects or other things on your screen if you want, if they're connected. So right here, we got this wonderful green triangle, which is an object. We're going to use the object green. We take the idea orange to the guy that's the idea guy, and the uh, thought bubble to the idea of concepts. So if I quickly glance at the screen while I'm busy talking to you, your brain will process the visual information that this green object, this word is green, this object is green. Your brain will process this as orange, it's going to process the idea as orange, and they're going to make that connection. Same with the concept. Well, so it makes it easier cognitive load wise. It decreases the cognitive load. While I'm busy explaining it to you, you don't have to read that sentence on there. Your brain will just pick up the colors are matching to a certain concept or idea that's connecting two things on that page. Next, if you have a complex task or a process to show, the best way to do it is through video or images, but more, I mean, you can use images. The images are good because you can build them out one by one and break the process down to each step. But if you can see an overall video how it's supposed to happen, like again, already talked earlier about cutting up a pepper, right? If you follow the process of cutting up a pepper, it's harder to explain to somebody to write it out exactly how to do it than it is to actually show them with a video. Minimize the amount of text. So on your pages, use images. Right here, we got this big fancy image, very simple. We got a little bit of text. Simplify the text. Like in this area, what I've done is I've connected the colors like we just talked about, minimize and text. If you quickly look at this, your brain will connect minimize and text together, which means you need to minimize the amount of text. Also, even just a short little phrase is okay to use. Even simpler if you could get it down to one or two words. And sometimes you just can't get around using words. Reading words is a much higher cognitive load than listening to words or viewing images are much lower. So if you can see something, you can hear something, you can watch me tell you and demonstrate, but what you can't do as I'm talking to you is you cannot read this together. So words alone on a slide or when you're presenting is not good enough. You have to have the image along with the words. Again, pointing out, like I keep talking about minimizing words, this is too many words. You can't read this as I'm speaking to you because either you're going to read it or listen to me. That's the trick. So have one or two words or simple phrase with colors connecting and an image that connects those two together. Again, we're talking about if a slide needs a large, we talked about this already. If a slide needs a lot amount of text where we actually need somebody to read it, especially if you're building online, people will put all this kind of text onto a page and they expect you to read it. People find it difficult to read PowerPoints and slides online. It is much easier to produce a PDF format that's set up for somebody to read. It's more traditional reading from a book or they can scroll through it on their phone. So we need to think of it that way. Or better yet, if you have this problem that you have to get this concept by and they need to read a lot of text, then you could also take the time as an instructional designer to break it down, right? And just key points and visuals on the information. The other thing too is create a PDF and a doc file so that way you got yourself covered. Everybody can download it and use it. And again, build some shelving, talk about what they need to read with some of the key points with some good visuals, and then send them to the PDF or doc file to read. So if we're thinking about that, we got this all this information. We're going to send somebody out. We're going to make them read this doc file or this heavy information that we need them to read, and they're relatively new to the information or they don't have any experience in it. What we can do is that we can find a video There's tons of stuff on YouTube, Vimeo. You can actually have a connection to the video, and before you even send them over to do all this reading to help them cognitively be lower while they're reading so they can learn more stuff, is what I would do is send them to a video. They watch the video. It's going to build a couple of simple shelves for them, right? And then you send them into the documentation, so they could be either their PDF or their doc or file, or even if it's just in your PowerPoints that you produced online. But it's going to do, though, is you're already set them up with some information that's a lower level education, like lower education here, simpler to learn. You built some shelves, and then when they get reading, the concepts and ideas as they're reading will actually pop up, and they'll actually develop some probably more shelves, but they're able to take this information here and get it onto their shelves and memorize it and make it last longer. Again, I'm not going to read the stuff to the bottom, but it's basically the idea that what I just walked through the concept. So it's just easier to store information if you have some shelves built, some underpinning knowledge, especially if you got to go read. An example of this is I teach EMRs, emergency medical responders, and the problem is that they have no underpinning knowledge when they come in. Most of them are coming out of high school. They might have a first aid course, but when they get in there, they don't fully understand what EMS is about and how to do patient assessments. And a lot of times when they come in, they don't have enough shelving. So we need to make it a little smaller and bigger, make it a little easier for them. So start with some videos, start very small, spoon feed them. Yes. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't call it spoon feeding, it's scaffolding. So again, especially like these EMRs are paying a lot of money to come in to get this course, and they're at a high-end institution, but we got to make sure we're providing them with value. Again, we're looking at this. So if a slide is delivered in a lecture style or like I am doing now, or if I'm standing up face to face, what I don't want to do is I'm not reading the slide to the people. Let's be very clear, it's hard for people. You have two language centers. Either you're going to listen to decode the language or you're going to read to decode the language. You're not listening to the instructor and you're not going to be reading the slide. So we need to really be very clear that when we're building our decks and slide decks, we need, as an instructor, you need to know the material well enough that while we're presenting, the slide images and single words are reinforcing what I am saying. The next step when we're looking at this, that there are certain people with disabilities that have trouble reading, and that could be whether they're visually impaired or if you're dyslexic like I am. I really appreciate it when there's just a button I can click and I could rather just listen to what's on the screen, right? It gets read to me. And that's a fantastic idea. That's where the words that are read directly on the screen, because when I'm listening to those being read to me, I'm not reading at the same time. Next, again, we're talking about scaffolding, kind of like cheat sheets. So create create docs, create cheat sheets, some process maps, especially if you're doing business training, right? And we're trying to teach somebody a new process in a business. Build a business, what do you call like a job aid, so they have it at home. They can be sitting on their desk, so they can think, oh my God, we took that 3 months ago. How am I going to do it? Have a process map. Also have other things that people can practice the material that you're teaching them. So if you're doing like a business training where they come in for 2 hours to get trained, but really there isn't a lot of practice in that scenario where you're just giving them the information, very pedagogy style, which I think is just fine depending on the content that needs to be delivered. Not all adult learners would need to follow the adult learning theory where we need to do group work and we need to do this and we need to do that. Sometimes the content needs to be delivered in a very straightforward manner, lecture style, to get in and get out because it's down and dirty. But we need to also have support underneath it. Can they go back and have a video to watch like this later on and review the information? So when we're talking about stuff, so the biggest thing is to help learner-centered design. When it's about them, tell them the information, show them the information is still way better before telling them, just go read the text, right? And then when you're done the tell and show, make sure that we have some type of practice for the people to do. To take that information they use and put it into power. So anyways, we'll be looking at the next slide here. Next, we're going to be talking about formal and conversational. So formal and conversational language. Do we write formally or do we write conversationally? Do I narrate conversationally or do I try to be very formal and write a straight script? Which one do you think does better? Well, when you look at that conversational is going to do way better than formal. It's outstanding how far conversational goes better. The reason why it does better is that the rationale behind conversational is that if I'm doing a conversational language, it actually builds a relationship with the learner, makes the learner feel more relaxed, which allows them to understand more information very quicker. So in summary, we got don't use more than 3 ideas at a time. One idea is better. Use colors to connect ideas. Use a pattern in your course, like sequencing. Make sure the pattern maybe have certain slides that show, like as you're going through this course, you'll see certain slides mean different things. And use conversational language. So like today, I'm not reading a script to you. I stumble over a couple things. That way it makes it more personable and more conversational. Now, all right. We're going to take you. We got a guest speaker coming in here, and we're going to take you on a field trip. So that's going to be some of that stuff you can practice to help you get the information that I've just spoke to you, how to make it stick.